Today I confirm that the federal and New South Wales governments have declared Sunday, 21st of December, a day of reflection to honour the victims of the horrific terrorist attack at Bondi Beach and to stand in solidarity with the Jewish community. Further, my government and the New South Wales government and other premiers as well will work closely with the Jewish community on arrangements for a national day of mourning to be held in the new year. This will allow families the time and space to lay their loved ones to rest and to support those still recovering. On Sunday, flags on all New South Wales and Australian government buildings will be flown at half-mast as a mark of respect for the lives lost and the grief shared across our nation. We invite people across Australia to light a candle at 6:47 p.m, exactly 1 week since the attack unfolded, as a quiet act of remembrance with family, friends or loved ones. We're asking all Australians to observe a minute of silence and talking with media organisations about that as well. This day is about standing with the Jewish community, wrapping our arms around them and all Australians sharing their grief. It is a moment to pause, reflect and affirm that hatred and violence will never define who we are as Australians. The terrorist atrocity committed against Australia's Jewish community last weekend was motivated by the evil of anti-Semitism. And yesterday I stood in this courtyard and announced further measures to eradicate anti-Semitism from our society. But in responding to the mass murder that we witnessed on Sunday, we must consider both motivation and method. The National Security Committee has met now 6 times since Sunday evening. We continue to receive advice on intelligence issues around that important body. And today we've been informed that by the Office of National Intelligence has identified a regular online video feed from ISIS that reinforces that this was an ISIS-inspired attack. Further work is being done by the security agencies around motivation and will continue to meet and provide them with whatever support they need at this difficult time. Today, I'm also announcing that the government will establish a national gun buyback scheme to purchase surplus, newly banned and illegal firearms, the largest buyback since the Howard government initiated one in 1996. Australia's gun laws were last substantially reformed in the wake of the Port Arthur tragedy. The terrible events at Bondi show we need to get more guns off our streets. We know that one of these terrorists held a firearm licence and had 6 guns, in spite of living in the middle of Sydney suburbs there at Bondi Beach. There's no reason why someone in that situation needed that many guns. There are now more than 4 million firearms in Australia, more than at the time of the Port Arthur massacre, nearly 30 years ago. The government will introduce legislation to support the funding of this buyback scheme and meet the costs on a 50-50 basis with states and territories. We expect hundreds of thousands of firearms will be collected and destroyed through this scheme. Consistent with the approach that was taken in 1996, the government is proposing that states and territories will be responsible for the collection, processing and payment to individuals for surrendered firearms. The Australian Federal Police will then be responsible for the destruction of these firearms. The National Gun Buyback Scheme is on top of the work that was agreed by National Cabinet on Monday, limiting the number of firearms to be held by any one individual, limiting open-ended firearms licensing and the types of guns that are legal, making Australian citizenship a condition of holding a firearm licence, accelerating work on standing up the National Firearms Register and allowing the additional use of criminal intelligence to underpin firearms licensing. Australians are rightly proud of our gun laws, and until 5 years ago, Australians were rightly proud that there had not been a repeat of Port Arthur. They were rightly proud we're not home to the constant carnage we see in some countries. But there have been, of course, incidents in both Queensland and Victoria that have seen so-called sovereign citizens murder police officers. We will introduce this national buyback scheme to get guns off our streets and to help to assist to make all Australians safe. In addition to this, we will also boost the AFP and the work they're doing through Operation Avalite. This is the operation that was established, of course, to deal with anti-Semitism. We will provide extra funds to provide the National Security Investigation Teams. Those teams disrupt high harm, high impact, politically motivated violence, communal violence and hate crimes. And Commissioner Barrett will speak to more of that detail now.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning. Hate speech and the weaponisation of words can have serious national security consequences. History has taught us, and recent events have reinforced, that hatred creates a permissive environment that can lead to violent extremism and terrorism. There are groups and individuals across Australia who are eroding the country's social fabric by advocating hatred, fear and humiliation. And I'm not going to mince my words, too much of this is directed at the Jewish community. A year ago, the AFP set up Operation Avalite to investigate anti-Semitism because of rising concerns and threats. The AFP has 161 current Avalite investigations and 10 individuals have already been charged. Now, this is just unbelievable. As a country, we should really reflect on those statistics. When I became Commissioner in October, I was so concerned about Australia's degrading security environment that I announced the formation of the new National Security Investigations Teams to target groups and individuals causing high harm to our social cohesion. Essentially, the National Security Investigations Teams are a flying squad of hate disruptors who focus on high harm, high impact, politically motivated violence, communal violence and hate crimes that don't meet the threshold for terrorism investigations, but that we know drive fear and division. This is all about stopping hate and division earlier and well before it leads to violence. So far, this crack squad has charged 14 individuals across 13 investigations, and of those, 4 individuals across 4 operations were charged for offences relating to anti-Semitism. The teams were responsible for a recent week-long national blitz on the distribution and display of prohibited symbols and for charging a passenger who only this week allegedly threatened violence toward a member of the Jewish community on a flight from Bali to Sydney. The announcement today to boost the numbers of our hate disruptors, as well as planned changes to lower the threshold for hate speech, will make it easier for the AFP to take action quicker. It could be the difference between us just knocking on a door to warn an individual to an individual being placed in handcuffs. And finally, if I could make these observations, as funerals for the Bondi Beach victims continue, I offer my sincere condolences on behalf of the AFP. Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner. Minister Burke.
Thanks, Prime Minister. Yesterday we spoke about the motivation and today we talk about the method that was used in the horrific, disgusting anti-Semitic attacks of Sunday. The announcements today with the buyback scheme make possible what the National Cabinet decision referred to. If you're going to reduce the number of guns, then a buyback scheme has to be a piece of that puzzle. The reduction happens in a number of ways. In the limiting of number of firearms held by any one individual, in limiting open-ended licensing, in making citizenship a condition of a firearm licence, in accelerating the work on the National Firearms Register, and improving the intelligence sharing decisions that underpin firearms licensing. As well as that, with the announcements that were made yesterday, it is important to note the national security investment teams mean that anyone who wants to engage in hate crimes, hate speech or use of hate symbols needs to know that even though we are lowering the threshold, criminal offences are already there. The extra arrests are happening because of the national security investigation teams, and the resources are being provided today for what was originally a measure established by Commissioner Barrett and something that she's been very passionate about, which has helped boost the work of Operation Avalite, that the expansion of those teams now happens. For those who want to engage in hate speech, hate crimes or use of hate symbols, they need to know the thresholds are being lowered and the resources for the Australian Federal Police are already there and are being expanded now.
Yeah, you missed out yesterday, so you go and then here. And then.
The buyback is going to cause a lot of friction, I imagine, not just perhaps with some elements of the opposition like the Nationals, but also with gun owners. Even some of your own MPs, Dan Repacholi, this morning said that while he supports strong gun laws, he doesn't support measures that are blunt, symbolic or designed to appease public anger. What is your message to people who may have to give up their weapons because of the actions of terrorists?
My message is that in 1996, the then Howard government did the right thing. Intervened to have a scheme which Australians have been rightly proud of. We need to go further. My message is that the issue of someone involved as a sporting shooter like Dan Repacholi is quite rightly proud of his representation of Australia. And he is a great local member, but he has a proud record going back. But if a bloke in Bonnyrigg needs 6 high-powered rifles and is able to get them under existing licensing scheme, then there's something wrong. I think Australians can see that.
Prime Minister, what's your...
Yeah. Hang on we'll go here and then here and there. And then we'll go over there. Yep.
Thanks, PM. We've had Royal Commissions in recent years into robo-debt, bushfires, veteran suicide and so on. Do you believe a Royal Commission now is inevitable now into this issue? And will you expose your government to a full examination of its response to anti-Semitism?
We are acting, and we've continued to act over a period of time. One of the things that I spoke about before was about motivation. We know that in this ISIS regular video that they put out, they are claiming that it was ISIS inspired, and we know there's evidence there that that's the case. This has been around for a long period of time. What my government is focused on is any further measures that we need to do. We have continued to act, everything from setting up Operation Avalite. The work that was done as well in finding out the connection between the IRGC and the attacks on the Adas Synagogue in Melbourne, the Georgina Street Newtown Synagogue, and of course the caravan incident in northwest Sydney. The agencies did substantial work to identify that. We then acted by being the first government since the Second World War to expel an ambassador from Australia with the Iranian ambassador. What I'm focused on is continuing to work.
Prime Minister,
sure.
Are you surprised at the lack of bipartisan support for gun reform at a federal level?
What I'm focused on is Australia's national interest. I'm focused on unity. People have decisions to make. This is not a time, in my view, for political differentiation. This is a time to bring the country together. I think overwhelmingly that's what the country wants to see.
Have you been communicating with the opposition leader about how best to approach this in a bipartisan way? And has she offered you the coalition support in any of the measures that you've announced yesterday or today?
The coalition put out a very, I think, positive statement on Sunday night of offering support for the Australian government and the New South Wales government for any action that should be taken. I spoke with her personally. I spoke with her again on Monday morning. We offered briefings. She received those full briefings. People can make their own assessments about what has happened since, but I've made it very clear publicly that I want to see bipartisanship on this issue. but that's not something that I can impose.
Prime Minister, you said yesterday that you took responsibility as Prime Minister for the fact that more could have been done to tackle anti-Semitism. Why wasn't things like a vilification hate speech laws, stronger hate speech laws considered or worked on in even the last 12 months when that initial amendment put forward it was decided it would be too complicated to do it off the floor at the time? Do you accept that it was a mistake to have not been working on strengthening those laws before the announcement yesterday?
We introduced the first hate speech laws. We introduced the first hate speech laws that have been introduced in Australia. We're the first government to outlaw Nazi symbols. We inherited a situation where I've been in this building a long time. For a lot of the time, I've been defending the existing anti-discrimination laws, which the Coalition for a long period of time said was an attack on freedom of speech and tried to remove them. We have undertaken those laws. If you look at what we have done consistently as well, it hasn't been set and forget. Can governments do better? Yes, they always can. Yes, they always can, as I said yesterday. But we have been meeting regularly with not just on the political level, but with all of the agencies. We've provided every level of support. I've engaged with state and territory governments as well on a full range of measures, and we've worked really closely as well since we received the report of the Special Envoy in rolling out the measures that were called for there, whether it be the National Student Ombudsman, whether it be the increase in security as well. I was meeting before Sunday, I was speaking with Jewish community leaders about an increase in an extension of the security measures, for example, that we included in the lead up to MyEFO, which of course was announced on Wednesday, but we included that work and discussions was taking place beforehand.
Susan Ley says let's get to work on what you've announced yesterday. Will you be recalling Parliament before Christmas?
No, it's not practical, and I suspect that the opposition leader knows that that's not the case. We want to make sure that we get the laws right. I take it to some of the previous comments which have been here as well, have gone to, why didn't we do more? We want to make sure that the laws are got right, and we want to make sure as well that there is broad support for it across the board. We will engage constructively. We will provide, when drafts are able to be achieved for what is complex laws, because there are constitutional issues, there are issues of free speech involved in this as well. We want to make sure that these laws don't get passed and then get knocked over. We have seen in High Court decisions in areas relating to migration and other issues related to that national space, we've seen courts make decisions. We don't want that to occur. We want to make sure that they are very tight. Just here.
I have a question for yourself and one for Commissioner Barrett.
Sure.
But I'll start with
Sure.
Commissioner Barrett, if that's okay. Did information from ASIO help lead to those arrests at Liverpool?
So what I would say about that, it is an ongoing and active matter. New South Wales Police have still got a number of people in custody, and I know that they did put a media statement out and that Deputy Commissioner Hudson has done some media interviews this morning, so I won't go into further detail other than to confirm that there was information that was passed to New South Wales Police from partner agencies.
Including ASIO?
I won't confirm that. This is a New South Wales Police matter, and as I said, it's ongoing and active.
Okay, sorry, I've just got one for the Prime Minister. Prime Minister, sorry.
Sure.
Prime Minister, was critical information that could have prevented this deadly terror attack in Bondi in the wrong hands, and could it have been prevented with greater information sharing?
Well, that is not the information up to this point does not suggest that that's the case. The information, as the agencies have said, indicates that these two individuals were involved in considerable planning of this terrorist act last Sunday. There is not an indication of others' involvement, but that continues to be an ongoing series of investigations.
Prime Minister, just to confirm the information.
Well, what information are you talking about
that
with
would have
respect?
led police to make arrests prior to the deadly terror attack?
Well, I'm not sure what it is that you're implying. I'm making it clear that none of the agencies are saying that they had information that was not passed on to anybody, if that is what is being suggested.
Prime Minister, two questions off the back of Sunday's attack and yesterday's police arrests. How many suspected Islamic extremists are on ASIO's watch list? And considering these events, is radical Islam an enemy from within Australia? Are there too many people here who don't share Australia's values and culture?
Well, when it comes to figures and ASIO's work, I will leave those comments to the Director-General and as to whether they wish to make those matters public. I can say this, that one proponent of support for ISIS motivated by a perversion of Islam that leads to extremism is one too many.
How many guns should people be allowed to have? For example, if someone is living in suburban Sydney, how many will you consider putting a cap on the number of guns they're allowed to have?
That is the subject of work because these are state laws. I mean, one of the things that happened, to be clear about the guns issue, is that New South Wales said on Monday morning they were going to act on guns. One of the reasons why there should be national leadership and a national cabinet process was brought in, because these laws are largely done by states and territories. The laws are only as strong as the weakest laws in any state. So Western Australia, for example, has, in the wake of a recent incident, undertaken a strengthening of their laws, something that I suspect you're conscious of, given your recent media background. That's why we have tasked Minister Minns, together with Premier Minns, together with Premier Cook, to oversee that process. They will undertake through state and territory governments, then come back to National Cabinet with the details there. I want laws to be as strong as possible, whilst, of course, providing for legitimate use of guns as well. Well, that's a matter for the Premier, but I would hope that all Premiers and Chief Ministers engage in the spirit in which this is intended, which is about keeping Australians safe. At the front there, and then Phil.
Being able to purchase identical shotguns within months of each other, should that be a red flag? And as for authorities patrolling and protecting Jewish events, should they be in possession of high-powered shotguns?
Well, I'll leave operational matters. With respect, it's important that they be left to the police, whether it be state jurisdictions or the Australian Federal Police. I think that politicians doing that, what I would say as the Prime Minister, is any requests from agencies I would be supportive of. And yes, I am surprised that that is the case. There's something wrong with the licensing laws when this guy can have 6 high-powered rifles, which is why the government's acting. Phil.
Maybe for Mr Burke, but it's on the gun.
Sure.
Just on the details of the buyback. Just cast my mind back to Port Arthur. A couple of things. Will it involve an amnesty as well, as we had 30 years ago for illegal weapons, including those that have been banned for 30 years, to sort of try and hoover those up? And I remember back then, legitimate sporting shooters who might have a number of firearms for different disciplines at their sporting club, if I remember correctly, there were carve-outs or exceptions made, or an attempt to accommodate that. Will that be the case this time, or when you're talking about a limit on guns, or can you see a way for that?
So these effective details are now going to meetings of officials. So I met with the other police ministers earlier this week. We had the Police Ministers' Council, and at that we set up a senior officials group. That senior officials group meets for the first time on Monday to be able to start to work through all the detail. The decision today from the federal government in making the decision with respect to buyback makes everything else possible in terms of what then gets resolved.
We'll go here, and then we'll just go there, and that's where we'll finish. So you'll get the last word.
Prime Minister, just to follow on Ruben's question, is radical Islam, in your view, the greatest domestic security threat Australia faces?
Well, the assessments are that that is one of the issues that we're dealing with. But I want to deal with all of the threats, whether it be extremist perversions of Islam leading to support for the ideology promoted by ISIS, whether it be also concerned about the issue of sovereign citizens killing police in Victoria and Queensland. I'm concerned about neo-Nazis thinking it's okay to march down our streets dressed in black, not worrying about their faces being covered, explicitly promoting that as well. Some of these things are not new. James Salim, National Action person, tried to kill Eddie Fundi from the African National Congress when I was a student. I was a candidate against that reprehensible fascist at Sydney University in 1983. This has been around a long period of time. There are issues have escalated, and we need to take action against all of them. Andrew?
Prime Minister, note your earlier comments about information sharing not being identified as an issue. What early consideration has been...
I didn't say that. What I said was...
In response, OK. But on that point, what early consideration has been given to the current structures of our law enforcement intelligence community? Was it a mistake to, after disbanding the Home Affairs model that was inherited, to then go back to it, now that that department is responsible for not only internal security, immigration, but social cohesion?
Well, we have continued to engage across government, but one of the 5 points that the National Cabinet agreed on was allowing additional use of criminal intelligence to underpin firearms licensing, for example. So that instead of just looking at does Andrew Green have a record, that there be an analysis of from intelligence agencies as well. That's a practical step going forward. Yep.
Just back to Commissioner Barrett, in terms of the operation in southwest Sydney yesterday, do you believe that that potentially prevented another terrorist attack? And just in relation to the gun buyback, Prime Minister, will that be mandatory or voluntary?
The first and then Tony.
Sure. As I said, it's an active and ongoing matter, and there are people still in custody, so I won't speak specifically to that. What I will say, though, is that it is an example of the high threat environment that we're operating in, and it's an example that the members of the public can be confident that police will take swift and decisive action. Yesterday afternoon was a clear example of that.
Tony?
You have a legal change about access to weapons, then if people have more weapons than they are now legally able to have, then it is mandatory to hand them in. And the buy.
If the limit is set at 5 in a particular state and someone has 7, they would have to forfeit 2 of those.
Well, so that yes, and so that's what's now being negotiated with the states in terms of what those numbers should be on that principle. But effectively, if it becomes illegal to be holding the number of firearms that you hold, then at that point you have to dispose of it and the buyback scheme is the way that would happen.
On that, with the buyback, if someone had under the limit but just wanted to take part in the buyback to sacrifice their guns, would that be a possibility?
These are issues that will be worked through with the states.
You mentioned today that you're going to push hate speech laws to their absolute constitutional limit. Are you able to just elaborate on what that means and whether that could cover potential political parties like White Australia that are seeking to register that the AEC doesn't have any control over? And Mr Albanese, I just want to ask, sorry, on a separate matter, do you have any more information about an Australian killed in Ukraine, fighting on the front lines in eastern Ukraine?
I'll start with my comments this morning that what I'm making clear is a determination from the government, but I also said in that same interview that my first meeting with my officials starting to work through the legal instructions on that was yesterday. There'll be a lot more work being done on that.
I've been in the National Security Committee meeting this morning. If we have any further information, my office will update you. Thank you very much, everyone.